Yo ho, conspirator's life for me. Ahoy everyone, and happy summer! In our corner of the world, it's that time of the year to go outside, go to the beach, and get some fun in the sun. You know, when I go to the beach, it really brings out the pirate in me. And what a coincidence, it looks like we've got a swashbuckling conspiracy to look at today. I'm sure you're familiar with the Pirates of the Caribbean series. Jack Sparrow has become quite the icon for piracy over the years, hasn't he? I hear word in these parts of the internet that he could be one and the same of another popular icon. A very familiar face, a gothic icon, if you will. Jack Skellington.
You click away and I'll have your gizzard served on a silver platter, you scurvy whelp. I'm being serious.
I'm Captain Arielle with Channel Frederator, and today we're asking if Jack Skellington used to be Captain Jack Sparrow. You know what? Yes, it sounds silly, but mark my words, I'm gonna have you on board with this theory by the time I'm done here. So, we have Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas and Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. Two men, one dead and one alive with the same first name and the same initials. We're wondering if Jack Skellington, when he was alive, was once the infamous Captain Jack Sparrow. But Arielle, I already see you typing in the comments, that's not a sound reason to believe they are the same person. Ah, this be true. With that logic, I can just as easily say that Jack Skellington used to be Jack Spicer when he was alive. Obscure reference is obscure. But, believe it or not, I have a lot more to go on than you might expect. In fact, I had my research notes for today's conspiracy written in two columns. Things the two Jacks had in common, and things that made them different. And surprisingly enough, the column of shared qualities beat the other by a landslide. Aye, lend me your ear and I will explain. To keep things from getting confusing, from here on I'm going to try to refer to them as Skellington and Sparrow, savvy? The first thing we need to talk about is James and the Giant Peach. As you recall, there is the scene where Centipede dives into the ocean, down to a shipwreck to retrieve a compass so he and his friends can figure out where they're sailing. He ends up finding one, and it's in the bony hands of a pirate skeleton. A skeleton that looks very familiar, or as Centipede calls it,
a skeleton?
That's him alright. Both James and the Giant Peach and The Nightmare Before Christmas were directed by Henry Selick. It's the same puppet and everything. Now there's a lot to say about this scene. First of all, we're seeing Skellington as an actual pirate here. This tells us that if this cameo is considered canon, Jack Skellington died as a pirate. Secondly, this pirate died over a compass, and when his compass was disturbed, so was his eternal slumber. Anybody familiar with the Pirates movies knows that Sparrow's compass, which points in the direction of the thing you want most, is his signature item. He relies heavily on it, and it's proved itself extremely useful in every film. You would think that whenever Sparrow eventually died, if someone tried to swipe his compass from him, he and his crew would come back to life and make the thief regret it. He's encountered plenty of curses in his lifetime. It seems about right. I mean, think about it. Pirates of the Caribbean is not a series about pirates. It's a series about undead pirates. Jack Sparrow is destined to be undead, and we all know it. Oh, and I know that the compass in Skellington's scene is way too big. But if the Black Pearl can shrink down to fit into a bottle, then Sparrow's compass can grow inconveniently big. Hey, maybe one of those crocodile tongues got to it. Everything's bigger in James and the Giant Peach. So according to this, Skellington was a pirate captain that went down with his ship. The golden age of piracy spanned from the 1660s to the 1730s. And the Pirates of the Caribbean writer said that they were aiming for a floating 30-year environment from the 1720s to the 1750s. So let's just say that this ship sunk somewhere in the late 18th century. Unless Captain Sparrow achieved some kind of immortality and lasted longer than that, nobody would be surprised. I mean, maybe he ate the revive fruit like Brooks. That would explain his skeleton form, but that introduces a whole other crazy crossover. So let's focus on POTC for now. Jack Sparrow did say that he wanted to be immortal and be the last pirate to ever exist. In any case, he eventually met his end, he rotted away, and his skeletal remains were left undisturbed until Centipede swam down and tried to take his compass. The Empire State Building, where James was headed, was erected in 1931, and the James and the Giant Peach book was written in 1961. So Centipede paid his visit somewhere around there. That is when Jack woke up, and I suppose from there on he needed to figure out what to do with himself in the new world. Skeletons don't exactly fit in around here unless it's Halloween, so where else would you run off to other than Halloween Town? Looking at the technology we see the humans use in The Nightmare Before Christmas, I would guess that it takes place somewhere between the 1960s and the early 90s. So the timeline between each of the movies checks out. Before we move on, you're probably wondering how Captain Jack Sparrow, the slurring, funny-walking, cowardly scum of a pirate, could ever evolve into the heroic, graceful, put-together Jack Skellington. I can provide you with two explanations. Number one, that time frame I just gave you from the 18th century to the 20th century, that is a hell of a lot of time for people to change. A person can change drastically within a decade or so. That is centuries of immortality. Although this would be the case if Sparrow wasn't, dead asleep for that whole time. For all we know, he was awake and living an undying life for a good chunk of those years, and then he was only in the state Centipede found him in for just a little bit. Look, Jack Sparrow's life is weird, we don't know. Explanation number two, amnesia. Since our subject was still acting like a pirate in James and the Giant Peach, his head was probably fine then. But what about after that? He was fighting Centipede when we left the scene. Did he get clonked on the skull? This version of the theory is supported by the fact that Jack feels lost in The Nightmare Before Christmas. He is bored with his life. He feels like something's not right and he wants more. He could have ended up in Halloween Town because, like I said, Halloween is where you find all the spooky, scary skeletons. And that's probably the direction that made the most sense at the time. But let's not be cheap about this with the, oh, he can change, and oh, he lost his memory excuses. While these explanations are still valid, Jack Sparrow has such a strong and recognizable personality that no matter what, he has to shine through as Skellington somehow. Remember that list I wrote of things they have in common? Let's go down the line. First off, look at how they move. Sparrow can be clumsy because he's always drunk, but aside from that, he's got the ability to walk, jump, dodge danger, and sword fight with the greatest dexterity. If the rum was gone, I think that Sparrow could be just as graceful as Skellington. Not to mention they're both showboats who are very expressive with their hand gestures. There's their shared interest, or at least comfort, in macabre situations. Skellington, obviously living in Halloween Town, feels at home among skulls, death, body parts, etc. Sparrow, even though clearly he would prefer not to die, when he deals with death, he seems rather unfazed by it compared to how others would be. He'll lie in a coffin with a dead man and use the skeleton leg as an oar. He's not bothered when cannibals gift him with a necklace of toes. He'll pick up a beating heart with no hesitation in his bare hands. Oh, zombie pirates? Must be Tuesday. He doesn't care. In The Nightmare Before Christmas, Skellington's first solo, Jack's Lament, has a lot of interesting little clues. Skellington has earned the title Mr. Unlucky. Jack has a long history of bad luck. People even tell him he's unlucky in the movies. Skellington sings that he's known throughout England and France. We know a pirate who's gained a reputation around those parts. Also, how he can remove his head. We see Skellington do it here and back in that James and the Giant Peach scene. Sparrow has had a few run-ins with the noose and the guillotine. As a pirate, he is very likely to eventually lose his head, immortal or not. He was probably decapitated and he freaked everybody out that he was still alive, and probably some ridiculous chase scene happened where he was riding on top of carriages and swinging on ropes or something, and his head was probably yelling at his body to come back. Contrary to what I just said, because that's just repetitive writing with the sequels, they're both unpredictable with their actions, they're both natural-born leaders, and they're both selfish. Speaking of which, I feel like they come pretty close when it comes to their morals. You think Skellington has a clean record? The mayor says he frightened millions to an early grave. Meanwhile, Sparrow tried to sacrifice 100 souls to Davy Jones just to get out of debt with him. Sparrow only looks out for himself. Skellington wasn't exactly thinking of anyone else's well-being when he kidnapped Santa Claus, stole his identity, and took over Christmas. He made the whole town go along with a scheme that benefited him only. You know that Oogie called Jack old friend in the filthy finale of Oogie's Revenge? Jack Skellington may not have always been such a goody-goody, I'm just saying. On the other hand, Sparrow isn't that bad of a guy either. He decided to come back and save the day at the end of Dead Man's Chest. He saved William Turner's life in At World's End. And when Angelica tells Jack that the Fountain of Youth needs a victim in the 4th movie On Stranger Tides, Captain Sparrow's not down for that. And we know Skellington ends up the hero in his story, so they sort of level out, you know? My final reasoning: Tim Burton. Pirates of the Caribbean did not involve Tim Burton, but we all know that Johnny Depp is very involved with him. You try to convince me that if Burton wanted to make a live-action Nightmare Before Christmas, that he wouldn't try to cast Johnny Depp as Jack Skellington and Helena Bonham Carter as Sally. That sound about right? Skellington doesn't have an English accent. Accents can fade. Sparrow isn't tall enough. It's stylistic. Sparrow is too cowardly. People can learn to be brave. I feel like people might argue that shipwrecks, especially centuries-old shipwrecks, are never found with skeletal remains intact. Saltwater and other elements makes them wither away real fast. Except the Centipede did find the skeletons intact, so even though it's scientifically impossible, so are curses. So there's that. There are a lot of broad factors involved here that make it hard to argue. Honestly, my biggest gripe with this theory is how dare they take away Jack Sparrow from the sea. It's the love of his life. It is his life. In Davy Jones' locker, Sparrow's personal hell was a desert, a ship with no ocean to sail. The amnesia theory helps us dodge this a bit, but Jack Sparrow's connection to sailing, the pirate's life, it's way too strong to just disappear. No amount of time can erase that. It's not a phase, Dad. Even with memory loss, there would at least be some nautical paraphernalia in his house, even a ship in a bottle or something. I looked. In the movie, in the video games, the best I could find were the fish bones that Sally gave him. I wonder what that was about. Well, I think his longing for something else would lead him back to the sea, not Christmas Town. And his revelation at the end of The Nightmare Before Christmas would not be that he was the Pumpkin King. Not unless he was coming to terms that the age of piracy is over and he's moved on. Which is a possibility, but that doesn't mean he couldn't just, I don't know, get a boat like a regular dude with a midlife crisis. Oh, one more thing. In James and the Giant Peach, among these pirates, there's one salty sea duck that is very clearly supposed to be Donald Duck. Now there's a theory debunker. When would Jack Sparrow ever sail with? Oh. You know, if we're putting that game on the table, I'm gonna mention that we meet both Jacks in their separate worlds in Kingdom Hearts 2. But I'm ready to wrap this up. Let's just call the gummy ship a time machine and call it a day. Who actually knows what's happening in Kingdom Hearts anyway? So yeah, there's a lot more to back this theory up than I ever expected coming in, but there's no real aha moment to it. I think what's best is that we give it 2 shrunken heads out of 5. It's not quite as ridiculous as you might think. There's a bit of madness to it, yet a bit of brilliance as well, you know? And it's remarkable how often those 2 traits coincide. We all love a good Disneyverse theory, am I right? You know, if people can believe that the parents from Frozen are the same parents from Tarzan, this sort of thing doesn't seem like much of a stretch, does it? What do you think, lads? Let us know in the comments below if this conspiracy shivered your timbers, and tell us which Pirates movie is your favorite. For me, I'd have to go with the original. OG Barbossa is back. While you're below deck, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad, where if you do, you'll get notified every time that we post. We post cartoon conspiracies every Thursday. I'm Captain Arielle, also known as Arielle, also known as R2 Ninja Turtle. You're welcome to seek out my social media. I'm on Instagram, DeviantArt, and YouTube most of the time. Remember, Frederator loves you! Apparently Frederator also loves the pirate shtick. I wonder what that could mean. Really bad eggs. Drink up me hotties, yo-ho!